Production by
Michael Lofton.
You're watching Reason and Theology Live, a show dedicated to charitable discussion, debates, interviews, commentary, and analysis. The show concentrates on theological topics, historical matters, and philosophical problems with content ranging from introductory material to in-depth examinations. And now, your host, Michael Lofton.
Hey, welcome to the show, everybody. Our second stream for the day. Friday evening, your host, Michael. We got another show coming up in 30 minutes, by the way, so this one's going to be a short one, but I wanted to sneak it in there. We have Dr. Matthew Minard, who's going to be coming on doing a lecture on the Summa Theologica, and then after that, I'm going to be going on Swan's channel to talk about the Magisterium, so that will be around 7:30 Central. Right now, it's 5:30 Central, so in 2 hours from now. So yes, a couple more shows lined up for the day. Like I said, I wanted to sneak this one in. Well, what exactly are we doing today? Well, what we're doing is a call for discernment among faithful Catholics, which is effectively me asking faithful Catholics to use discernment whenever they come across things online. And, that would be even for my own material, any material that you come across. Use discernment. It is pretty clear that liberals, they're pretty conspicuous, right? Whenever they say stuff, it's pretty easy to identify their error. But it's a little harder to identify some of the errors of some of the reactionary Catholics in the church today. It takes a little bit more discernment. And that's what I'm hoping we will do. Well, what am I talking about? Classic example. And I'm not going to name who this is, this particular individual, because it's really not about them personally. They're a very good example, however, a good illustration for this very problem. Well, what am I talking about? Well, yesterday I did a show, of course, criticizing some of the things that Dr. Marshall said. I agreed with some of the things Dr. Marshall said, but then I criticized some of the things that he said about Pachamama and the kissing of the Quran and stuff like that. Although I spent a great amount of time denouncing the kissing of the Quran, denouncing the Pachamama event, for some, they still walk away saying, oh, Michael just defends Pachamama idolatry now. That is the comprehension skills, the level thereof, of some of these people. One of them is a fairly well-known commentator. Again, not going to mention who they are, because, again, it's not about them specifically. But they serve as a good illustration. Here's what they said. Again, I'm not going to show it on the screen because I'm not trying to address any particular individual, but I am going to use them as an example. They say, imagine defending Pachamama in 2021. And, of course, this was right after me doing my show, not defending Pachamama, but criticizing some of the reactionaries' position that goes a little too far and trying to bring that back in. Although still criticizing the event. But it's amazing that some of these folks who have a fairly large voice when it comes to the traditional movement, a lot of people are listening to them, some of these individuals have that low comprehension skills that they could watch the entire show that I did, presumably. If they didn't, that means that they're reckless and irresponsible. So I'm going to assume that they're not reckless and irresponsible and they actually watched what I said. It's amazing that they could watch what I say and come away with that thinking, Michael defends idolatry. Michael defends Pachamama. It's amazing. Why am I bringing this up? Well, if we lack discernment and comprehension in these things, if we can't even correctly understand a commentary show, how long did I do it? About an hour and a half? If we can't really understand a commentary show where I spend over about an hour and a half giving a very qualified position and criticizing Pachamama, what other things do you think they are not comprehending very well? The other things that they would comment on going on in the church today, how much discernment are they going to be able to display in comprehending that material if they misrepresent me so significantly? To the point that it's a lie. Of course, it's a lie because I didn't defend Pachamama. By the way, I see the super chat. Thank you for that, Larry. Best content on YouTube, Arnon. Keep it up, Michael. Thank you. I appreciate the super chat. What I'm asking is that we show discernment whenever we listen to some of this stuff. Use discernment and ask yourself, if this person gets it so wrong in this one place and they lack comprehension skills so badly and significantly in one area, how reliable are they going to be elsewhere in their research? Probably not very reliable. So we should probably take what they're saying with a grain of salt. If they misrepresent me that significantly, they're probably going to misrepresent Vatican II just as significantly. Some of the pre-conciliar popes and what they're saying. Some of the post-conciliar popes and what they're saying. And even Pope Francis himself. Now, problem with Pope Francis is he opens himself up for a lot of misrepresentation. He not only opens himself up for that kind of criticism, he even rightly should be criticized in some areas. But then I think that there's sometimes where you get these knee-jerk reactions from these this reactionary group, where they're quick to condemn something that maybe Pope Francis says, or something they come across in Vatican II, or some other thing that they see on Twitter or Facebook. They're quick to jump the bandwagon instead of really looking into the things and showing discernment. And that hurts our cause as traditional Catholics. It doesn't help us. It hurts us. It makes us look ridiculous because other people who are thinking people and are showing more discernment will see that behavior and will write us off. Now, I'm not saying people can never make a mistake. Of course, some people make mistakes and bad judgment. I get that. But then there's some mistakes that just should not be made. And then also we shouldn't be consistently showing this kind of poor discernment. Thank you for the super chat there, William. This particular channel needs a comedy hour. Lots of fear-mongering. Yeah. Again, it's not about calling any particular person out, so I'm not interested in doing that. But the point is that the tweet that I'm talking about here, and again, not naming who it is indicative of something I'm seeing among other people as well, a trend among reactionary Catholics, and that's why I'm bringing it up. And of course, as soon as that was posted, everybody jumps the bandwagon. There's nothing they won't defend, and just going on and on. How could anybody tolerate and defend this idolatry of Pachamama? You know, all of that. And it's all based on a lie. So if people are very quick to jump the bandwagon, use very little discernment, and buy into a lie posted on Twitter that quickly, my question is, how often do you think that happens whenever these same commentators are speaking about things in Vatican II or Pope Francis or otherwise? Probably happens a fair amount of the time. If they show such poor discernment and such poor comprehension skills with me, they're going to do that with others. And thank you, River, for the super chat. A lot of people think theology and hot takes are the same thing. Yeah. Again, that doesn't mean that people aren't going to make mistakes. We're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to misjudge something. We're all going to sometimes have that gut reaction. I get it. I'm guilty of it. We're all guilty of that. I understand that. But I think this is happening too often for it to be excusable at this point. Much too often. Well, this same commentator continued, with everybody who's jumping the bandwagon there on Twitter, continued and said this. It's on YouTube. A commentator in love with Vatican II is defending idolatry. Wow. Imagine lacking, imagine having such poor comprehension skills that you could watch this video that I did yesterday and come away thinking that. And again, I'm presuming that they watched the video. If they didn't, guess what? That makes it worse, because now you're commenting and accusing somebody of not something that's not only a lie, but you're now doing it when you didn't even watch it. And that would be okay and if the person said, hey, I'm sorry, because I addressed this with that individual. I said, you're lying. That's not true. And the problem is you're a hypocrite because you want to criticize the Vatican for lying and covering up the Fatima message, which is what they believe. But then you hear lie about another Catholic. You're being a hypocrite. I said that and I got blocked. I didn't get an apology. I didn't get a, hey, I'm sorry, I misjudged you. You're right. Instead, I got blocked. So, wow. But let me address that real quick, though. A commentator in love with Vatican II. So I've actually said that Vatican II is the worst ecumenical council we've had. Most likely it's the worst. I think it is. It's definitely in the top 3, if not number 1. Personally, I would put it in the worst. That doesn't mean it's not an ecumenical council. That doesn't mean the Holy Spirit wasn't generally working with it. That doesn't mean it's not authoritative. That doesn't mean there aren't things in there that are good. It doesn't mean that we should be in dissent from it, and so on and so forth. But yeah, it's still one of the worst ecumenical councils. Although it meets the standards of everything that I just said, it meets those standards. I think it should have given us more. It should have gone more than the bare minimum. When it comes to the standards of an ecumenical council, they gave us the very bare minimum. And it should have given us more. And that's one of the problems, one of the criticisms that I have with Vatican II. I'm not in love with Vatican II. But what I am going to do is defend Vatican II against those who are going to call it heretical, dismiss it, because that's dissent. And they are then no better than the liberals who are in dissent from Humanae Vitae and Ordinatio Sacerdotalis and so on and so forth. I'm just being consistent. I'm saying, wait, you can't just completely dismiss the current magisterium or even the post-conciliar magisterium or the current magisterium. You can't just automatically do that. You might be able to reserve assent in some rare cases, sure, but that's not what's being done here. What we're hearing instead is slander against ecumenical councils and the teaching authority of the church. That's what we're hearing. And I know where that leads. And so I'm warning against it. And I'm showing how inconsistent we're being, because we really then have no basis to then criticize the liberals for their dissent. We have no basis to criticize the Father James Martins unless we're going to just take it to a natural law conversation. At least these people aren't violating the natural law, the reactionary traditionalists, right? Whereas James Martin is not only going against the magisterium, he's also going against the natural law. So unless we're going to just reduce this to a natural law discussion, some of these reactionary traditionalists are just as bad in their dissent as Father James Martin in some ways. And it's even more insidious and harmful because James Martin, he's conspicuously liberal. I mean, you know the guy's a snake. I mean, it's not hard to know that this guy is a wolf. It's not hard to know that he's not from God. That's not hard to discern. it's a little bit harder to discern whenever somebody is presenting themselves as a traditional Catholic, and I claim to believe the magisterium, but then they're actually in dissent from the living magisterium. It's a little harder to discern in those cases, and people are going to be more easily misled in those cases, and that is my problem. They're less conspicuously in dissent. So I would like for us to be a little bit more discerning in some of the commentary that we're listening to. And of course, that includes myself. I'm not going to get everything right. Sometimes I might be wrong about some of these things. You'll also notice, in many cases, I try to not actually give a full-fledged commitment to a particular position unless I've really studied it. I'll say, here's what I currently understand in my current understanding, but I could be wrong. Whereas others tend to be very, very cavalier in their approach, and they are sure Vatican II is heretical. They're sure that, so-and-so is defending Pachamama idolatry, and they're just sure of these things, and it's very brash. Thank you for the super chat there. The heresy and schism keep the nuance and distinctions. What I'm noticing, though, is some of the people who used to be what I would just consider regular traditionalists are becoming much more radicalized lately. Radicalized to the point that it looks like they're in material schism. De facto. They're materially schismatics because what they're going to generally do is completely disregard the post-conciliar magisterium. Their hermeneutic, their way of interpreting and weighing and evaluating magisterial propositions and the level of their authority is preconciliar versus postconciliar. That's their paradigm. That's it. Nothing else. Those are the only weights. And guess what? Preconciliar always outweighs postconciliar in their mind. That's going to lead you de facto into material schism. And even, some other worse forms of dissent. It's going to lead to a very seriously problematic position where you're effectively, at least materially speaking, maybe not formally, maybe not knowingly, but materially in what you're maintaining places you outside of the church. Because if you really think that the current magisterium doesn't have any kind of authority, you have a problem. Now, a lot of these people would never come out and say, yeah, the current magisterium has no authority. They're not going to come out and say that. But that's the way they behave in practice because, okay, well, what do you accept from the post-conciliar magisterium? Is there anything that you accept? Well, they might give you Humane Vitae Ordinatio Sacerdotalis. They might give you a couple of those, but okay, but what about these other things? What about them? Because the very basis for us accepting some of these other magisterial documents that they might accept is also the same basis that we would need to accept some of the others. Again, having said that, I understand that there are some cases in which you could withhold assent in some very low-level, non-definitive, yet authoritative magisterial teachings, as I've said many times on this show. But that being said, that is being exaggerated, and people go with it way too far and then apply it to pretty much anything that the living magisterium says. That's a problem. So I'm seeing people who I didn't think were that bad off going really far out there, and it's troubling. And either my eyes are just now being open to it and I exercised poor discernment in the past, or they're becoming more radicalized, one of the two. So I'm asking, this is a clarion call for others who are faithful Catholics. Let's use some discernment, not only when it comes to the liberals. Use discernment when it comes to some of these traditionalists, because if you're not careful, I think they're going to lead you by the nose right out of the church, straight into schism. And some of them don't even know that they're in schism. That's what's even more insidious about it, is they don't even realize that what they're maintaining is schismatic, and what they're maintaining is dissent. So, if you have any questions, go ahead and shoot them to me at Reason and Theology. Got just a few minutes here before the next stream with Dr. Minard. So, yeah, if y'all have a few, go ahead and send them to me. I'll do my best to answer them. Any kind of questions that you have about what I've said, or if you feel I'm not being consistent myself, let me know. Help me see the error of my ways. But it just kind of seems to me like this is what's going on today in some traditional circles, and it's very, very troubling. People keep wondering, why am I harping on these things so much? Because I'm seeing so many people being misled, and I'm getting messages from a lot of these people about how they've left the church because of some of these claims. And I've also experienced them and lived through them myself. So, what are examples of low-level teachings where dissent is allowed? Honestly, I think the revision to the death penalty is definitely an eligible one. It was a papal allocution, or not a allocution, but a papal address that the revision was based on, right? And of course, the catechism doesn't carry any additional weight in and of itself. The weight of what's in the catechism is based on the sources. And of course, the source for this revision is one papal address, which is pretty low in the, in the scheme of things when it comes to the magisterium. It's way down there. It's nearly at the bottom. So, it might be authoritative. You don't want to outright dismiss it, but at the same time, it's pretty low. And there might be some things in the magisterium prior to Pope Francis that could possibly outweigh what Pope Francis is saying. That could be the case. Again, read Donum Veritatis. It talks about all this. It talks about these scenarios and what to do, how to handle it. Just read it. It'll help you a lot. It takes a very balanced approach. See a super chat. I think here was a shift around a year ago when some trads started speaking up for Vatican II that marked a change in the discourse. People kind of picked sides. I think you're right. I think you're right. I do think it's been in about the last year or so. People are becoming much more radicalized. Do you think that fighting the trads is the most pressing issue of the church today? No, which is why I don't do all of my shows on that. If you look at the majority of my shows, they're on other things. I deal with Eastern Orthodoxy very often. And then we deal with other issues like Islam and atheism and other topics. So there's plenty of other issues to address as well. But I do think that it is an important topic to address because I'm seeing the effects of it. That's why. And I'm seeing where it leads, and I know where it leads by experience, but I'm also seeing where it leads. And so I'm trying to offset some of that so that people have a source for hearing the other side and getting an alternative. I mean, you have Proverbs that talk about this. The first witness, he's going to sound really, really convincing until you hear the other side. The same thing. You're going to hear some of these reactionary traditionalists presenting some things very quickly, very flippantly, very irresponsibly, portraying certain events. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. But in the cases where they go too far, those cases are going to end up leading people into schism, effectively, or heresy even. So I'm trying to balance some of that out and give people an alternative so that they can just hear the other side. And people can make an informed decision. That's then on them. But I at least give that opportunity to the online apologetic community. And if other people are doing that too, great. I'm looking, y'all. See what else I can find. Why do you rarely deal with liberalism and modernism in the church? Because the reactionary traditionalists are already doing that ad nauseum. They're doing a wonderful job at denouncing everything liberal and modernist. What I'm going to try to do when I'm having these discussions is try to offset them. Moreover, liberalism and modernism are conspicuously heretical. Anybody who has the Spirit of God isn't going to be led astray for very long when it comes to there's going to be that sense of the faithful in them saying, this guy's saying abortion's okay. This guy's saying same-sex acts are okay. The sense of the faithful is going to kick in at some point, right? That's conspicuously wrong, and it's easy to see the error in it. It's harder to see the error in some of these other things. That's why I see it as my mission, my calling, if you will, to offset some of that. Now, somebody else who has their stuff dedicated to addressing problems with liberalism in the church and stuff like that, that's great. But I feel like there's plenty of people already doing that. You don't need another voice to come out and do that constantly. I'll do it on occasion, but we already have plenty of people doing that. What we do lack is people balancing out some of these reactionary traditionalists who are leading people outside of the church to sedevacantism, or to Eastern Orthodoxy, or to Protestantism, or to Oriental Orthodoxy. That's what we are lacking. So I see a gap that needs to be filled. Okay, I'm going to fill it. Now, if there were all of a sudden nobody really denouncing liberalism and modernism, yeah, I'm going to talk more about that at that point. I'm going to fill in the gap. So that's effectively what I'm doing here. That's why. Okay. Liberalism in the church is goofy and ridiculous. There's nothing to do with balance of courage. It's not a theological category, but an ideological. Yeah, look, some of this stuff is just, it's clear. It's clear, right? And there's already plenty of people engaging those errors. There's no point in me reinventing the wheel and rehashing something that's already being done very well. What's not being done well is balancing out then the reactionary traditionalist commentary on these things. That's not being done. Either people are not informed enough to do so, or they're afraid to come out and do so. You don't know how many messages I get from people saying, Michael, I can't believe you have the courage to go out there and criticize Taylor Marshall. I'm glad somebody's doing it. Some big names, too, reaching out and saying, I'm glad somebody has the courage to do it. Okay, well, yeah, there's a void that needs to be filled. There's a gap that needs to be filled. So doing my best to try to do that. Michael is a modernist. Changed my mind. It won't be hard. Just getting people to understand, first of all, the definition of modernism. Most people who use the definition don't know what it, or use the term don't know what it means. But yeah, nobody who pays even attention to maybe 10 minutes of my show would ever call me a modernist. That's ridiculous. But you won't be able to lump me in with the reactionary traditionalists. That much is certain. But in some people's minds, they think so narrowly that unless you exactly agree with me in my reactionary traditionalism, you're a modernist, you're a liberal. That's how limited they are in information and in discernment and in scope. It's how shallow they are. And I think that we need to move beyond that. We need to dig deeper into our faith, take a healthier approach. Okay. Well, again, we got a stream coming up here with Dr. Minard in 5 minutes. So y'all take a look at it. If y'all can, join it. And yeah, he's going to be talking about the Summa Theologica, continuing his lecture series there. So it's going to be on the other stream that I have queued up in the channel. So I'll go ahead and end this one and then enter the new one and start in just a moment with Dr. Minard. And then later on at 7:30 Central, I'll be on Swan's channel if y'all want to check that out. So again, I appreciate y'all watching. Don't forget to comment and like, and of course subscribe, and share it on your social media, your Twitter, your Facebook. Hit the bell for notification, and then of course patreon.com/Reason and Theology if you want to support us. We'll see y'all in just a little bit. God bless.